I mentioned the hash change event in the previous chapters and that we are going to skip using it for keeping track of state. Since this chapter is about interactions and events, it is necessary to mention the hash change event as well, because it is used in most modern JavaScript frameworks aimed for the browser environment. The hash change event tracks the change of the hash part of the URL, which is traditionally used to mark in-document links. As we mentioned before, the most natural way to track the web app is by using the browser URL, since the browsers were designed to correspond to URLs first and foremost. While using a browser, whenever we change the URL, it results in the page being changed inside the browser window. Adopting this behavior for tracking application state has many benefits. It won't confuse the users by breaking the back and forward button functionalities, as is the case with our application. Additionally, it is friendlier to SEO. However, introducing it as an additional component in our application would have introduced additional complexity. There are a lot of libraries that can take care of it with some work, but handling that is out of the scope of this course. However, there is an example of how to do this in the course repository. So if this is a topic that happens to interest you, you can use that as a starting point and as an example. Additionally, we should mention the push-state API, which is a more modern approach to state handling in the browser. The push-state API, in this context, does the same thing we were doing with the hash change event, but without the hash in the browser. This allows for the most natural approach to URL handling, without resorting to hacks to make things work. More on the push-state API can be found at developer.mozilla.org. In addition to the local, per-view events, we have something that we may consider global events. For example, changing a route is a global event, as it concerns the entire application and what is shown on screen. Additionally, the way we currently change call controllers from views slightly violates the separation of concerns principle. The principle mentioned is about keeping every layer of our application as isolated as possible. This approach has multiple benefits, but most importantly, we'll be able to swap any part of our application without having to worry about breaking the other parts which communicate with it. For example, we mentioned managing our data through an API previously. In the current state of our app, it is doable, but it requires more work than it should. We'll address this shortcoming by introducing an EventEmitter utility class, which will help us isolate our application's layers even further. Essentially, we can view the EventEmitter as the wire by which our layers communicate. This is similar to a phone line in that regard. Whenever something significant happens in one of our views, we can publish that event to the EventEmitter, and any layer listening to that particular event gets notified of the change. This can be used in many different scenarios, and it is especially useful in scenarios in which we use asynchronous APIs, such as Ajax, timers, etc. For our EventEmitter needs, we'll borrow a piece of code from the widely known Backbone.js framework. We can write one ourselves, but it is simple and minimal enough to understand on our own. This has already been done, and is exposed globally as EventEmitter. Our EventEmitter uses three methods: on, off, and trigger. These methods work similar to their jQuery counterparts, which aren't aimed at the DOM, but instead at custom events that concern other areas of an application. Instead of calling our controllers directly, we'll simply trigger and listen to events triggered through the EventEmitter. EventEmitter.trigger document :update record instead of controllers.document controller update record. Before trying this out, if you get stuck, the solution is available at the repository. Additionally, we should agree on a standard way of naming our events. So each of our events will be named as follows. First comes the entity we are trying to trigger an event on, in our case, document or category, followed by a colon, followed by the action we are trying to trigger. While listening for an event, we'll use the following syntax: EventEmitter dot on condition action to perform. As an example, EventEmitter on document :update function of record update record in our document controller class. And to wrap this up, in this chapter we took a deeper view of events and their importance in our application. Additionally, we've begun using the global EventEmitter to simplify things. See you next time, and we'll start extending our application with more functionality.